Ysera Terran Shaman is a archetype that was introduced in the new mini set. The idea behind the deck is to outcontrol your opponent by having extremely high value minions and creating large starships that will gain too much armor for your opponent to deal with. In aggro matchups, you want to be using your taunts, such as the Defense Crystal or your Taunt Traveler. You want to make sure that you're looking for Starport and Liftoff to be able to draw cards quicker, and obviously you want to be launching those starships to make sure that you're keeping up in the tempo race with your opponent. And then if you're playing against control decks, you have the Bomb Boss, who will then obviously reduce the cost of your... will reduce the amount of playability from your opponent by threatening them to exploit their cards on their field, their deck, and their hand. In addition, you also will have Jim Raynor, which can create your big starships, along with Hydration Station and Unkiliax, which makes for an extremely aggressive, extremely strong combo to deal with aggressive states. And obviously it means that you can stall out quite easily to then outvalue your opponent. In addition to that, the deck runs the new Ysera Emerald's Dream card, and with that you're able to obviously get to 15 mana in total, which is quite strong, especially since you do run quite a lot of late game cards in your deck to deal with the opponent. The cards you want to mulligan for on this deck, you want to mulligan in general for Starport, Liftoff, New Heights. You also can look for Needle Rock Totem, in addition to the Defense Crystal in aggressive matchups, along with Tortillan Traveler in aggressive matchups. If you're playing against Warrior, you want to hold the Ysera and the Bomb Boss, because those are quite useful into the mirror match to make sure that you're threatening your opponent's board state and their deck as well to possibly hit some of their combo pieces. Going into the game, you'll see that I just had, I drew into my Unkiliax, which is going to be quite strong, especially since they won't have a particular way to be able to deal with it very easily. My Starship is obviously getting quite big, and with the Defense Crystal being able to go into the pool of the Starship, it means that I'm not worried now about having its silence, so we'll have a Taunt minion that can go on for my Hydration Station. I don't play the Unkiliax just yet, just because obviously I want to get my Starship bigger, but since they didn't have a hex that turn with Thrall's Gift, I played down the second one because I want to get extra value coming from that card. If they obviously did get a Thrall's Gift, they would have played it, because that would have been the turn to obviously get rid of the Defense Crystal, because in general, having the Defense Crystal down on the board is always going to be really strong for your opponent. I just play down my Unkiliax and then I just trade into the 3-1. I'm not really too worried about what their Starship ends up doing. And since I have the 2 Hydration Stations in my hand, it means that I'll be able to outvalue my opponent anyway. They do use the Dirty Rat, which is fine. Like, I'm not really too worried about that. I think they potentially were hoping to be able to hit a Mind Control tech onto one of my minions. Obviously the Unkiliax in this situation. The lock-on obviously is a little bit scary as well, to be able to take out my Ysera, but in reality I do have quite a strong board that I'm going to be able to deal with my opponent. The Hydration Station will be very strong as well going into the turns too. They do have their Battle Cruiser, which is going to be online relatively soon if they're wanting to. They're obviously just playing it out a little bit longer. I do just play down the Bomb Boss and then trade into the Dirty Rat. The Bomb Boss means that I am able to threaten my opponent's deck and their hand, especially if they draw into the TNTs, which they did. Obviously it gets rid of their missile pod. It gets rid of their Jim Raynor as well, which is really important in this matchup as well. So I did get quite lucky as well to be able to get the TNT to hit that Jim Raynor. It means that they lose a lot of their ability to control this sort of matchup. They still haven't used their Starship as well, so they obviously are waiting till I launch my Starship and things like that. I do just send my Bomb Boss face and then I just pass. There's not really any play that I need to do. I don't really need to send out my Starship at the moment as well, because I'm waiting for them to send out their Starship before I even consider that sort of option. And since I do have the Hydration Stations in my hand, I'm not too worried about them obviously building up their board and things like that. I do have a Brawl here. I use it, but in reality I didn't really need to use it because they weren't really threatening anything with that board state they had. Obviously drawing the extra card is a little bit worrying, but Besides from that, there wasn't really any reason to. That's probably a change that I'd do. They use that ETC here, so this is probably going to end up being like a Kill Jaden or something like that to be able to survive against Bomb Boss. I do draw into my Fizzle, which is really good for me. Obviously, it means that I get the extra value coming from my hydration stations and things like that. And then I obviously use the hydration station to then get my Unkiliax back out. Then I use my armour up just to get more armour. It would obviously be nice to have the Starship already launched, but in reality, just getting the hydration station out means that I can get a bigger Starship using my extra 3-4 that comes from the hydration station. I also do want to make sure that my opponent isn't able to really deal quite easily into it, so by sending out my Starship, by sending out my hydration station, it means that my opponent can get lulled somewhat into a false sense of security to be able to deal with what's on the board in front of them. Like I could obviously use a hydration station and things like that here. I do trade my Ziliax in, and then I trade into the ETC as well. Obviously it gets rid of that. I do have my defense crystal here as well. I do play, like, in terms of playing down the 3/3, it clears out their deck a bit more. Hitting the Ceaseless Expanse is really good for me as well, because it means that they won't be able to clear my board very easily. They do play down that Kill Jaden, so they do, with their hand state at the moment, they are now going into the late game sort of environment for this. By having my hydration station and my Gym Rainer, I do have a relatively strong state here. They do just play down the Fizzle as well, but it doesn't particularly matter too much for me, simply because of the fact that they can't draw it now, since they do have the portal with the Kill Jaden. I get my Starport as well and just play it down just to get more ships online. They really are missing out on not using their Starship. Like, they should have used it quite a long time ago now. I still obviously do have my my Titan here as well. I have the Starship that's online, and I do have my ETC and my hydration station, so I'm not really too worried about what potentially could come out against me. I play down the ETC here, and I choose the Inventor Boom because at this sort of state, I am not really too concerned. The Sleep Under the Stars is a decent choice, a possible choice as well, just simply because of how many cards that I have in my hand. Like, I don't really have too much happening for me at the moment. With the Inventor Boom, though, it means that I'm sitting on a state that I can obviously get my Unkiliax out, and then if I do have a hydration station, if I do end up launching the Starship soon, I'll be able to deal with them quite easily from it as well. They do play down their they do end up using the Lightning Storm here and play their Battle Fiend. They have the 6/9 onto the board as well. Once again, they should be launching the Starship. They're not doing it correctly. There's no reason to be trying to hold for this sort of length of time, especially because of how the board state is at the moment. You don't, your Starship loses a lot of its value the longer that you hold it for. I'm not launching mine because there's no real reason to, since they haven't launched theirs and they're not really threatening too much. And I do now obviously have quite a wide board with the extra Starship pieces going into it. They do only have 2 cards left in their hand. They only have 3 cards in their hand that could be some sort of threat towards me as well. So I'm not really too worried, considering that I did just play the hydration station down. I have the Inventor Boom as well, which means that I can use that along with the battle cruiser to be able to go into my opponent if I need to. They do play down Dirty Rat, which obviously then gets my Inventor Boom onto the field, which is a little bit unfortunate. But since I have still quite a strong board state, I'm not really too worried. I obviously have my 16/19 here. I trade in the first of the Starship pieces. I use the Starport just to see what I end up getting, which is a 2/1, which is pretty good for me. I then just trade into the 2/2. My battle cruiser is at 22/21, so they're holding theirs just as long as I'm holding mine. It's almost like a stalemate of sorts. I end up launching it here. It doesn't end up killing the their minion that's there. It's a little bit unfortunate, but in reality, I'm not really too worried since they only do just have the one card, and I still have the Gym Rainer that's here. The getting the Titan Forge traps would have obviously, sorry, getting the fizzle snapshot would have obviously been really good in this sort of situation, but I'm just holding out my Gym Rainer as well just for the next when they end up launching their Starship, because if they launch their Starship, obviously it's more than likely to get poisonous with the amount of Ravens that's inside of it as well, that I do need to make sure that I've got some sort of defense against it. So it does end up getting the Ravens, so it's able to clear most of my board. They get the 2/2s onto the field as well. With my AoE, it then is also able to clear, and then they have to just trade into my guy. So I'm not like I'm sitting still in a relatively decent position. They obviously did just get an 11, 13, which is fine. I did also then just draw into my snapshot as well, which means that it's essentially just going to win the game for me. It doesn't really matter if I play Gym Rainer or Hydration Station here, both will do the same sort of thing, because they obviously don't have any Gym Rainer into their field, and yeah, I just use the battle, I just use the hero power and then just pass over to them. My board state is obviously very strong for them to be able to deal with. They just play down their hero power and then just pass over to me. I'd obviously do a Bob here as well. I use the hydration station so I can do a little bit more trading. With the 22-21 as well, I'm sitting in a relatively good position. I trade my Ziliax into their minion, then just pass the turn over to them. I did end up missing some damage. I missed 2 damage there, but in reality, with this board state that's here, and the fact they don't have Ceaseless Expanse or Gym Rainer, there's no chance that they'll end up winning, and then they just end up conceding. So obviously, in the grindy sort of matchups, if you hit key pieces, they do end up significantly falling to you. Okay, so playing against Rogue, the cards that you want to be keeping is you want to keep your Totem. You also want to keep your defensive cards. Shield Block's reasonable. You want to have Starport, Liftoff, those sorts of cards. New Heights is fine as well, just to be able to get into the later game a bit easier. If you can get Unkiliax onto the board with a relatively decent health total, you are more than likely going to be able to win, because the weapon rogues don't run any way to get through Ziliax without obviously trading their weapon and all those sorts of things to which they end up losing. It shows that it's not going to be a weapon rogue. It's using so at this point in time, I'm thinking that they're using a Starship Rogue, but what you'll see in the little bit next bit of the game ends up being Cutlass Rogue, which is perfectly fine for me because it's not as aggressive as Weapon Rogue, and it means that I can end up setting up and out valuing the opponent for it as well. I do end up drawing into my Gym Rainer with my Totem, which is good. It means I've got it already set up into my hand. Next turn I'll be looking to play down my New Heights to be able to draw, to be able to set up further. I could play the Totem down in the situation. I end up drawing into Liftoff, which obviously changed that idea. In general, Liftoff is going to be a better card to play just because you end up drawing more cards. And with them having a 3-2 on the board anyway, they are posing a little bit of damage. And just getting the extra card draw from your deck is always going to be quite strong, since you can use New Heights later on anyway, and there wasn't any turn 5 mana play that I'd be looking at doing anyway. I could have obviously, if I'd used the New Heights, done Liftoff the next turn, which then would have meant that I could have done the Totem plus Liftoff, but it doesn't really change too much. And then they end up just trading into my Starship, and yeah. So going into the next turn, I do play down the New Heights here. I'm not really in a situation that I need to worry about too much. I trade the Raven in, and then I just use my Totem to draw an extra card. Since they have the Cutlass on their field, it's more than likely going to be able to take out my my Totem, which, you know, it's fine. Like, it's not really too big of an issue. They end up getting their Valorok, which obviously is going to get them a relatively decent card as well, so I need to make sure that I'm thinking about what potential options could end up being from it. They use the Shadow Step on it as well. This, and with the Starship piece and the extra card coming from their different class, it does make the Cutlass increase its durability. So at the moment they aren't posing too much damage with the Cutlass. It's obviously just doing 4 damage at the moment, but it can become a little bit of an issue if it does end up getting a lot bigger, especially if they are able to deafen my defense crystals. Yeah, so like next turn I'll be looking to get the defense crystal down, and I'm hoping you in general want to be getting down as early as possible to reduce the likelihood of them having deafen, because with deafen it does make the starship a little bit considerably weaker. I use my starports here, obviously getting them online. I played the defense crystal to the left, so then if they did end up getting some sort of cleave effect, they wouldn't be able to trade into all my minions at the same time. And then if they had something like one of the bouncing effects that goes across the board, they wouldn't be able to do it there either. So unfortunately, they do end up having the deafen, which is then able to obviously get my defense crystal out. My defense crystal not having the effect on it, and then they just go face. They are posing quite a lot of damage now. I'm down to obviously 12 health, so I need to be thinking about how I'm going to deal with the opponent's board. I do have the 5-drop in my hand, and then with the Garrosh's gift, I can trade the defense crystal into the 5/7, play down the 5-drop, use the Garrosh's gift to be able to get a shield block, and then obviously increase my health total while clearing their board. And then the next turn I'll be able to play the AAECAQcOiKAE down to defend my health total a little bit more. Since they only have the 5 cards in their hand, I'm not getting posed too hard by what potential they may end up playing. They play down their Exarch, so that's obviously quite a strong card to be getting from the Valorok, because they've got it reduced, but also it reduces the cost of other spells to increase their durability even more. They end up getting the Starship schematic, which is quite good for them because they can obviously get extra value coming from that, but also that it's a really low cost card. They then get a Lucky Comet, which is quite a low cost card as well, and obviously it's generating extra value for them as well. They then use a Mixtape, which gets them an extra card too, so they are getting a lot of extra value coming from the Valorok, which is then into the Exarch. Then they get 2 random pirates, which random pirate and elemental, which isn't too much of a concern for me, especially since in general at this sort of stage in the game they're not going to be really too threatening towards a controlling sort of deck. Yeah, so next turn I'm going to be more than likely playing AAECAQcOiKAE down, just to be able to deal with the opponent's 5/5, but also then heal myself as well. They do also unfortunately miss the weapon swing too, which is quite a big miss. I don't think it really mattered in the grand scheme of things, but posing the extra damage obviously would be quite important for them too. I get my AAECAQcOiKAE down on the board. They use the stick up. There's not really any card that they can get from stick up that will really worry my AAECAQcOiKAE. I will end up getting obviously extra value and extra health coming from it. And then I'm hoping that my defense crystal will be able to stick next turn. They end up playing their Starship piece down that they ended up choosing. It's a 1/4, so it's not really posing too much damage towards me at the moment either, but it is a way that they can trade into my AAECAQcOiKAE. They end up getting my defense crystal through the Mixtape, which is a little bit concerning, just simply because they obviously do get extra armor coming from it. I end up drawing into my Bomb Boss as well, which is obviously going to be threatening a little bit towards them. I do just play the defense crystal and my ham down, just because it means that I could potentially draw some important minions. I got a Yodeler, it doesn't really matter, like it's not really too important for them. I'm pretty sure that was just one of the cards they shuffled into their deck. They do use the Hip Hop drop onto my defense crystal, and then they use Deafen onto the ham for some reason. I'm not really sure their justification behind that. It didn't particularly make any sense to me. Then they end up using the priest card to be able to take out my Ziliax without getting me to heal anymore. But by them using the deafen onto the ham, it meant that my defense crystal got to go into the pool, which obviously increases it significantly for future turns for the Gym Rainer, and then obviously I do end up getting the taunt coming from it too. They end up using Wheel of Death, so now that they're just working with such a small amount of cards, I do need to start rushing them down. So I'm going to need to be launching the Starship as well, going against them. I do end up drawing the concussive shells, which means that I can launch the Starship with the Gym Rainer as well to get a big board going against them. And I'm also do this play just because of this. It's possible it's really strong for it too. I launch the Starship and then I play the Bomb Boss. And possible another opportunity that I could have done here was the Gym Rainer. Another possible opportunity that I could have done here was play down the Bomb Boss. It would have cleared their board plus got the extra 3 cards out of their hand as well. Their Wheel of Death does end up proccing here, so it gets the extra thing. But because I have Wind Fury on both of my minions, I'm sitting in a relatively strong position because they won't really be able to clear it too easily. And then with the Divine Shield as well, it means that even with their weapon, they can't trade into it without having some sort of AoE to be able to clear the board. They end up playing their Freebooter, which does have the ability to freeze, but it's not obviously going to be able to. They have obviously the 12 damage weapon, but it's not really doing anything at the moment either, so they aren't able to heal. So I did get quite lucky by having both the defense crystals having the Divine Shield, and then obviously I ended up conceding as well because there wasn't really anything they could do there. Going into the next game, I am playing against a Warrior. So with Warrior, you want to be keeping your more late game cards because then they're going to be going into the late game as well. Your Starport's always a really good keep. The Bomb Boss in this situation as well is quite strong because you could potentially hit the Gym Rainer or the Defense Crystal or Ceaseless or Fizzle or things like that. That's obviously really important for your opponent's strategy. And Ysera means that you will ramp up into the late game a bit stronger than your opponent. Obviously, by getting the extra access to mana, you are able to overwhelm them. I do end up drawing with a Sleep Under the Stars, which is quite good to be able to draw extra cards and get access to extra resources going into the late game as well. I play down the Starport and just use the Starport. It ends up being a Banshee, which is going to be one of your stronger starships. You obviously can't control the starships that end up drawing, but in general, Medivac's going to be the worst, especially going into matchups that involves 2 control decks. I use the shield block first here, and then I use the concussive shells just to trade into the 2-1. It does put the Medivac into their pool, which is quite good for me, because Medivac, in general, as I mentioned just before, is going to be one of the worst of the cards. They use a liftoff and it does get them another Medivac, so it's getting pretty unfortunate for them. I use mine and it gets a Raven, which is another of the stronger cards to be getting. I use my hero power and then just trade into the Medivac just to get it into their pool again. Yeah, and then I've got my Starship down to 3. There isn't a defense crystal in at the moment. In this sort of matchup, you, in general, wanting to launch a Starship later, but if I was them in this situation, I'd be wanting to get my Starship online as soon as possible, and then obviously look to launch another Starship, because with the Medivacs, they are tempo cards, so in this situation, like if I had a Brawl, it would obviously clear it, but since I obviously don't, or I'm not going to, it does mean that they would then be able to launch that Medivac section and be able to get another one set up with their Gym Rainer. I end up getting my ham and I just play it down because it potentially could hit into one of their strong minions. It does hit into their defense crystal, which is quite good for me. It obviously then also goes into my pool for hydration station. They trade into my minion and then they get their own ham down onto the field. So I don't really want to be having this sticking around, especially since it potentially could hit something important. Unfortunately, I don't have any particularly easy way to trade into it. Launching the Starship won't guarantee the take out of it, so I do just have to use the second liftoff and just pass over to them. Yeah, because there wasn't, like, I could have used Bob there, but in general, you want to be keeping the Bob for Bomb Boss, or yeah, you want to be keeping it for Bomb Boss basically, or Ceaseless Expanse, but in general, it's going to be Bomb Boss, so you can get a second set off. They end up getting their ham to hit another of my minions. Once again, it's lucky it doesn't hit Fizzle or anything like that. I do just play down the Bomb Boss, I think, here. Because, oh, hold on. I launched the Starship because it will more than likely have Rush and Wind Fury. So I just launch it. It does mean that I won't be able to get it back with my hydration station, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to start building up another of the Starships. And it only being an 8/4 does mean that they do threaten quite a bit with that. Next turn's more than likely going to be Ysera play, because with Ysera, it means that I'll be somewhat threatening towards them. The reason why in the previous turn I didn't play down Jim Raynor is because of the fact that the reason why I didn't play down the Bomb Boss was because if they ended up having Bob, they'd be able to deal with me quite easily. Right now what I'm thinking about is deciding whether to play Bob to get the Ysera, to get the Ziliax, or to play the Bomb Boss, or to just play Ysera down and just trade into the Unkiliax. In general, there's not really any incorrect sort of play in this situation. If I did use Bob the Bartender, it would mean that I would obviously not have access to my own. I wouldn't be able to get access to the Unkiliax. I wouldn't be able to get access to a second Bomb Boss, which is going to be quite strong into the next part of the game. They potentially then also could use their Bob the Bartender to be able to get it back out as well. They end up playing down their Bomb Boss now, so it does mean that I obviously have the TNTs going to my deck. I do draw into a Fizzle here, so it's important that I am getting the value from this, especially since they potentially could get TNTs coming as well. So I just play down the Fizzle now, and I use Bob the Bartender to take control of their Bomb Boss. It does mean that they will be overdrawing going into next turn, which is good for me. And I just play the Defense Crystal down as well. They overdraw their Ceaseless Expanse, which is quite good for me. It means that they won't be able to get access to it later on. They use their Bob the Bartender, and then it ends up using it onto my Bob the Bartender. I don't particularly think that's a very strong play, just simply because of the fact that, yeah, it gives me the coins, but it's just quite weak. It means I can use the two Bomb Bosses this turn anyway. And then I'm also then applying quite a lot of pressure towards my opponent. In this situation, it's also giving me extra coins means that if they have TNTs, they potentially could just hit the coins. And because I'm up to 14 mana already, I don't really need to be holding or using the coins in most situations. They end up, the TNT ends up hitting, which does then clear their Starship piece. Doesn't really matter too much. And obviously with my Bomb Bosses on the field, I am posing quite a lot of damage. They do end up using Bob the Bartender here, but since I'm down to 6 cards, I won't end up overdrawing this turn. But with their Bob the Bartender, it means that they aren't really posing any damage to me going into this turn unless they launch their Starship. I do obviously still have the Ceaseless Expanse in my hand, and then I also have the hydration station and things like that as well. They launch their Starship, so it does obviously get the Medivac parts out, which is not going to be great for them. And with the Bomb Boss, I'm sitting in a relatively decent position. I do end up drawing to Unkiliax. I do want to get that onto the board since they won't again have access to another Bob the Bartender, so I will be able to use my Unkiliax going into future turns. I will be able to use my Unkiliax without it getting taken from them. And then I use my hero power, and then I just trade the Bomb Boss into the 2/2. Just because if they use their Jim Raynor, they potentially would be able to trade more favorably if they obviously did use Jim Raynor and then hero power. They play down the Bomb Boss that they took from me with their Bob the Bartender on the field as well. I'm sitting in a decent-ish position, especially since I do have access to ceaseless. So I'm not really too worried about what they can pose towards me. With my bomb boss, I can trade into their bomb boss if I need to as well. And since they don't have access to a ceaseless expanse, I'm not really too concerned about that. I trade my bomb boss into their bomb boss, and I just launch a hydration station, just because it will get me access to the ham, but also it means it increases the size of my new starship that I'm building, and then I just hero power. Obviously I'm not using any coins, because if they do end up hitting, if I do end up hitting a TNT, it will possibly clear important cards. My TNT doesn't really hit anything too valuable from their deck or their field, but hitting the hydration station is very important for them. They use their second hydration station, which does get their battle ship online. It also obviously gets their ham and their Ankyliacs. I've already got my most important minions out, so I'm not really too worried about their ham hitting anything important in my deck. Hitting the ETC could be a potential concern, since I can get access to Inventor Boom, but I'm sitting in a relatively decent position going into the later game. The ETC to be able to hit the Kill Jaden if it goes into an extreme late game. But because I have Ceaseless Expanse, I am sitting in a decent enough position to deal with them. I do end up drawing into a Defense Crystal here, so what I'm thinking about right now is how I'm going to deal with the potential of their field. Trading the Ankyliacs means that I can use the Ceaseless Expanse here. I, in general, would prefer not using it, but I do just get all the cards access to that I can before a TNT potentially hits, and being more aggressive and getting the board, especially since they don't have Bob the Bartender or their own Ceaseless Expanse, means that I'm sitting in a stronger position. They use their Sanitize, which clears the majority of my minions, which is fine. Like, I'm not really too worried about that. I obviously do have TNTs sitting in their deck as well, which is good for me. They use the Blade Storm, which is able to then kill my Ziliacs, and then they use their ETC, which will be able to get them the Kill Jaden if they're wanting to. And then obviously it means that we'll be going into the later sort of game here. With the snapshot draw, I can finally get rid of these coins that are in my field. I launched the Starship just to pose some extra threats towards the opponent, and then I use the Sleep Under the Stars to be able to get the extra mana, so I can use all of my cards that are in my hand. I use the coin, I use another coin, and then another coin. It obviously gets the Gem Rainer. I have the 8 cards in my hand, so I use the Snapshot now, which then fills up the rest of my hand, so I don't have to worry too much about a TNT. And then I use my hero power and just go face with the Ankyliacs. It means that I'm playing around the TNT, especially with the board that I have here. The TNT ends up hitting their deck, which is really good for me. I get another TNT proc off, which once again clears the rest of their stuff, and then another TNT, which clears the majority of their field in their hand. With only 2 cards obviously in their hand, they do still have the ETC card, but I'm sitting with such a strong board presence now that there's not really anything that they can do. It hits their Gem Rainer as well, so they could have got a Kill Jaden, but with so much damage sitting on board, there's not really any sort of chance of comeback. And then that ends up being the win, obviously. Going into this game, I'm playing against a Hunter, so quite often it'll either be Zerg Hunter or it'll be Grunter Hunter. The 2 cards the cards you want to be looking for in particular is Liftoff and Starport. They're your best cards. The Traveller obviously is quite strong as well to defend against possible minions, and if the Traveller hits a Defense Crystal or the Ziliacs, you're in a very good position. Yeah, so my Ysera ends up obviously proccing, and then I do draw onto my totem here. I don't really want to be playing it down until I find out what type of deck the opponent is. If they are playing a Grunter Hunter, I don't want that to be on the field since they can use that as an extra proc to be able to take damage onto me. I use the lift off here and it does hit a Raven, which is really good for me. You'll notice that I didn't use New Heights there just because of the fact that it's decent, but it's not. You want to be applying as much pressure as you can into your opponent. There's not really anything that I need to be doing in this turn either, so I just use the New Heights now and then go phase. Next turn's going to more than likely be Starport into the Totem, which is the reason why I played in that sort of particular order. Using the New Heights obviously gets me extra access to my cards. I do draw into the Defense Crystal as well here, which is good. Using the Concussive Shells means that I'm testing for any card that they potentially have. It obviously ends up being the Ice Trap, which means that I don't need to play around Hidden Meaning or Rat Trap or anything, obviously. They do play their Ranger Ghillie down, which does show that they are more than likely going to be a Grunter Hunter, or some sort of buffing hunter. They do still have the spawning pool, but it does show that their deck is not going through the correct draws that they'd be wanting. I trade my 2-1 into their 4-1, and then I just pass over to them. I don't particularly now want to play the Totem at all, just simply because it will be a liability, especially if they do get the big Grunter off. Getting the 1-5 down now means that I can trade into their 4-6 without having to worry too much, because if the 1-5 sticks around as well, it is another card that can quite easily be traded into. The 2-1 once again as well is a card that can be traded into quite easily too. They do get their Zerglings down onto the board, and they use their spawning pool and use their bird watching, so this will be picking another of their Zerglings. Obviously, it'll get a bigger buff onto their board. They then play down their Zerglings, and then they use the Evolution Chamber. So this does pose quite a lot of damage towards me. Luckily, I do end up getting the Unkilliax here, so it's not really anything that they can do to defend against an Unkilliax as well. I have the Starship as well, which can clear quite a lot of their board too. I do just play the Unkilliax down into them, and then I trade into the I could trade into the Zerglings, or I could trade into the Ranger Ghillie. With the Ranger Ghillie, it means that if they do that trade, it will buff their minions that's in their hands. And I also want to be getting that Ranger Ghillie staying on the field, because it means that they won't be able to get the... They will keep getting extra minions put into their hand, especially if they... So then they can't use their reserve spotters effectively into me. With that trade going into my Unkilliax, it does mean that I get mostly back up to full health, and I do have the full health total as well to be able to deal with them. With my Starship that I have on the field as well, it means that I'm sitting in a relatively strong position going into the later turns. They end up playing down their Zerglings to get an extremely wide board as well. I do have the Brawl in my hand, which is quite good, and with the Garrosh's Gift, I can use the Starport, then the Brawl. It gives me an extra card possibly that I could win with, but also it means that it will go into my pool of minions for my Starship. And I just play down the Totem here just because they don't have the Grunt. It doesn't seem like they are going to get it, just because they haven't played the reserve spot down yet. I do have a way to get my Starship online anyway. Unfortunately, they do end up using the reserve spot and Cup of Muscle here, so they are getting some extra buffs onto their cards. But with that, they do end up just using as the charge minion to go face. So they've got the 7/12 that's there, and then they just go face with their other minion as well. I use the Hydration Station here because it does get me my Unkilliax, and then I just trade into them. With that, it means that I am sitting in a relatively strong position. If they do end up getting the Grunter, it would be a bit of an issue for me, but with the Unkilliax, they can't really very easily trade into it. They do end up getting the Carrigan, which means that it gets rid of my Starship. It gets rid of my Totem from the board, and my Starship obviously is getting stronger now as well. they use the Ravage here, and unfortunately for them, that doesn't really hit any targets they really want it to. And I obviously still do have the Unchiliax onto the board. I trade my Defense Crystal into their minion, and then I launch my Starship just because it's possible it'll have poisonous, but also it means that I'm threatening damage towards them. With the Defense Crystal in it as well, it means I can get extra armor, and then I just end up trading into my opponent with the Unchiliax and just pass over to them. They don't really have a too easy way here, even if they do play the Grunter down now, because of the fact that I do have the 2 poisonous minions here, and then they end up just conceding. So if you've liked this content, please like and subscribe, and bye for now.